let's talk good game design. Except before we do that, we need to clarify what in the world that actually is. It's like me coming up to you and going, hey, I do graphic design. It's like, well, that's great, but do you do logos? Branding? User experience and user interface? Photo editing? Actual photography? What about typography? And on and on and on and on and on it goes. Game design is just like that. So, for the sake of this video, what I'm talking about is the broad umbrella of game design, the high concept of game principles that can be applied to any other subtype of game design in order to quantify how objectively good a game generically is. And also, on top of that, the main crippling flaw with only paying attention to the objective criteria. When I was coming up with this stuff, I found myself asking a lot of questions. All the notes that I had taken from watching GDC panels, reviews, or video essays ended up being questions, and a pattern emerged. Every single question was a negative. A question that almost always aimed to point out what was wrong with a game rather than explaining what would make it better. So I wrote them all down, and then I changed them all into a statement that was positive rather than a question that was negative. So for example, does this game feel like it's a waste of your time? Became, a game should not be a waste of your time. See, simple. Okay, so let's dig into that one first, since we already brought it up. A game should not waste your time, and nor should it feel like it's a waste of your time. Playing a game should feel meaningful or valuable in some way, and at a bare minimum, it shouldn't purely be a test of patience to beat. This is what dings games like Desert Bus and Ocarina of Time. So yes, what I'm saying is that fundamentally one of the worst games of all time makes the same mistake as one of the best games of all time. You may now start the flame war in the comments and shower righteous dislikes upon mine video. Both of these games either actively waste your time or at least feel like they are a waste of time. With Desert Bus, the game isn't hard, it's not rewarding in any way, and it's, on a purely subjective point, it's not exactly fun. But it also takes a full, uninterrupted 8 hours of your life to quote-unquote beat, and that's just one way. And if at any moment you mess up, you get towed back to the start also in real time. So if you played for 6 hours, real-life hours, and messed up, it'll be another 6 real-time hours before you can try again. It was literally designed to waste your time. It is a quote-unquote trick minigame.
Smoke and Mirrors is like the anti-video game. It's made up of 6 mini-games that exist for no other reason than to play jokes on your friends.
On the other hand, Ocarina of Time wastes your time more so on accident as a consequence of the new gaming conventions that it created in order to cope with becoming a 3D game. Combat is really rudimentary, especially by today's standards, and the puzzles are simple for the most part. So, in order to prevent the player from feeling underwhelmed, you're made to invest more time, so that you've waited for success. Each small victory, each hit landed, each enemy slain feels like a climax to something. But when you take a step back, and you look at what you actually did, you weren't being proactive, you were just passively waiting until the game said you're now allowed to win by pushing a button or two. It's like a glorified QuickTime event before QTEs were ever a thing in the mainstream. Aaron Hansen, or Egoraptor online, did a phenomenal video on this years back in a short series called Sequelitis, so here's a clip of him ranting about that.
The source of a lot of Ocarina's problems is that the game's idea of difficulty is waiting. There is so much waiting. In Ocarina, every enemy has a period where they just stand around and do f***ing nothing, and attacking them during this time is useless. Deku Scrubs, Stalfos, Lizardmen, Skulltulas, Wolf Dudes, Gerudos, Clams? Waiting is not a difficult thing to do, but it creates the illusion of difficulty because it takes up your time. And that's all it does. A fight feels like an ordeal when you have to devote a decent amount of time to it, but it's not hard. Just look at Final Fantasy IX, Skies of Arcadia, Grandia. These long-ass battles, not hard, but they feel like there's something.
And I'm not even going to get started on the arbitrary wait times in things like MMOs, gacha games, or idle games. I will be here all day. We're not talking about that. It's all bad. So, that's what not to do. On the other side of that coin, though, how do you make a game feel valuable? Well, for one, and personally I think this might be the most important thing, the game should always give you something to look forward to. Or, it should otherwise reward you for your progression. Another way of looking at it is that the game should always be doing something to motivate the player. Good games do this in a number of ways. They could reward players for going out of their way to explore the world or levels beyond what's required, for making good or interesting narrative decisions, for having good strategies that bring in additional benefits beside just winning, or even something as simple and pure as just having outright pro gamer skill. This tends to be the first thing that I mention in my reviews because it's just that important. Starting off positive, the game does reward you for your exploration with lots of loot, mostly in the form of money for the shop, as well as the occasional mini. The level design of the game teaches the player how to use its unique mechanics, and rewards players who master those mechanics as quickly as possible. The game does a decent job of rewarding players that go off of the beaten path. A bit of exploration will almost always yield something fun or useful in the form of equipment, encounters, Easter eggs, or some other collectible. A game, on some level, is a negotiation. You, as the game developer, are constantly trying to convince your players that the thing that you created is still worth being invested in. That's why people keep playing. You know what makes people stop playing your game, though? It's unfair, or it's boring, or maybe it just makes you feel so freaking stupid. So let's go in order on those and turn those into positives again. A game should fairly and consistently scale its stakes and difficulty according to the progression of the player. Or in other words, difficulty spikes are bad. Let me explain that before you dislike this video immediately. I'm not talking about when a game presents a difficult puzzle or a boss. In a good difficulty scale, it's not purely linear. There's going to be bumps in the graph where the game deliberately challenges you on the skills that you've built up until this point. What I'm talking about is when I say difficulty spike, it does this.
You call this resisting arrest? We call this a difficulty tweak.
A difficulty spike in this context I'm talking about is when the game goes from moderately difficult to virtually unwinnable. I'll use Halo Infinite Legendary as an example. Bassus and the Spartan Killers are BS. They're actually stupid. You will be here for hours, dying over and over to insta-kill after insta-kill until either you figure out how to manipulate their AI or you get really lucky. Check out Hidden Xperia's Legendary Guide to see how you can cheese these guys, because you essentially have to. I wouldn't have beaten Legendary without it. When you have to manipulate or break a game in order to win, it takes you out of the experience. It breaks your immersion. You're not the Master Chief avenging your fallen Spartan brothers. No, you're just a dude sitting and mauling and seething in your chair because Bassus turned you into a
Soft inside.
splatter on the floor for the 12th time in the last 5 minutes. It's just bad game design. Now, like I said, don't mistake this for me saying that hard games are bad. That's garbage. Metroid Dread is, I'd say, the second hardest Metroid game in the series, and I rated that thing an A tier. I am, however, saying that the Dairon Emmy is bad because it has an irregular difficulty spike from the rest of the entire game that's almost impossible for you to be prepared for at that point without having played it already, and trying to avoid it stifles your ability to progress in the game. Bad game design. And on the note of progression, the last two things that I want to talk about go hand in hand with each other, so we'll bring them both up at the same time. A good game should flow with a consistent pacing without becoming monotonous, overly repetitive, or boring, and a game should make you feel clever, not stupid. Let's use Halo Infinite as an example again. Man, I feel bad for ragging on this game, but I critique because I love. One of these things that, yes, does make it feel like classic Halo, which on its own is kind of a selling point, but is also a bad thing from an objective standpoint, is something that's also probably the most consistent complaint from every review I've seen, including mine. The linear levels become super repetitive with repeating copy-pasted rooms and hallways. If you aren't paying attention, you could even get lost just because this hallway looks like the same last 3 hallways you've been in. The way Infinite gets away with it is by introducing a ping system so that you always know the direction of your objective, but that's something that compensates for bad level design. It's not excusing bad level design. And the reason that it's bad is because it violates this overarching principle. It's too repetitive and monotonous. It gets lost in the noise and it's boring. A lot of the same that looks the same. And in terms of making you feel stupid, I'm going to use another Metroid game, and Dunkey as an example. There's a section of Metroid Fusion where you might find yourself in this pit. If you want out, you have to place a Morph Ball Bomb on a very, very specific, indistinct tile.
Here's a great example. I'm stuck in this room. I can't jump out on the left or the right. So, time to shoot every single tile in the room, right? Okay, nothing happened at all. So now I just sit here trying to wall jump out, trying to bomb the floor with my thing, try to shoot every tile with a missile. There's no way. You're stuck here. You're stuck here for the rest of the game. And this game. Why would anyone think to blow that up? There's no visual cue, no audio cue. It is literally the same exact tile as every other one on the floor. And even when I was bombing the shit out of that area, it didn't even get hit. You have to drop the bomb specifically on the exact right part to get it to come up. This is what I call a Metroid moment.
And just like Halo Infinite, the last two Metroid games have introduced a mechanic as compensation for bad design principles that have now become iconic to the Metroid formula, so they don't want to get rid of them. The scan pulse and the pulse radar. You can now send out a ping, and it tells you which of all the blocks in this room are interactable among all of the other indistinguishably different blocks in the room. At least in most games, a destructible surface will have some sort of crack in it, or will be some way identifiable. And heck, other Metroid games have done it right, but for some reason, the 2D Metroid games just haven't figured it out or stubbornly refuse to. So instead of dealing with this flaw in their game design formula, they just add new game mechanics so you can deal with it instead. Now, I want you to listen carefully to this specific thing. This is another big problem, and it's a game development problem, not just a game design problem. I'm going to say a product development problem. Never forget this. You, as the consumer, or in this case the player, are not responsible for fixing a game's problems. If the devs have shipped a product that's broken or ends up being unusable, remember, they gave you something that's broken. It's their responsibility to fix it. If I give you a branding package and it sucks, and I say, this is the final product, it's not your responsibility to then throw it into Photoshop because, oh, well, I have the tools to deal with it. I can manage, I'll make it better. No! I should have done it right in the first place. It's my fault as the designer, not yours. Giving you the ability to fix my mistakes doesn't change the fact that I gave you a product with mistakes in it. And speaking of mistakes, let's address the one reason why I have the opinion bonus content at the end of every review. The one crippling flaw of judging things purely by objective design criteria is because there's no way to quantify fun. A product could be made spectacularly and you didn't like it, or vice versa. You might like something even though you know it's trash. For example, Red Dead Redemption is a phenomenal game that I didn't like. I'm just not a fan of Westerns. I find them boring. It's not my thing. Doesn't mean the game was bad. Likewise, I loved Sonic Adventure 2, and the Sonic Adventure games are dumpster fires. So, a product can be immaculate. But what good is it if you can't balance that with whether or not you enjoyed it? That's why I always tell you what I thought in the end, because my opinion can't tell you if a game was good, but I can tell you if I thought it was fun. I hope you all found this informative. I have similar stuff written about each of the different design categories that I critique games on, so if you guys want, I can make more videos about each of them and how they kind of interrelate to each other. But for now, that'll be it. So I'll see you guys all next time.